All right, we are on air live, Google Hangouts, MacAdmin Monthly October. Hi everyone on the Hangout and future people watching this, and Philip who just walked in. So yeah, we have a bunch to catch up on this month. I think Ed Igerman had to bail out sort of last minute, but we have Jesse from Fleetsmith here, and going to be talking about Fleetsmith, and I guess we can launch right into that.
Awesome.
So I bet there are a bunch of people that don't even know what Fleetsmith is. Why don't you give us an overview of what that is?
Absolutely. So, hi everyone. My name is Jesse Endahl. I am the Chief Product Officer and Chief Security Officer at Fleetsmith. Prior to Fleetsmith, I was an infrastructure security engineer at Dropbox. And Zach and I, the CEO, were really motivated to start Fleetsmith because we wanted basically a different approach to Mac management than we had seen in the market before, and that's why we are here today, basically. So specifically, we wanted to differentiate in three ways. One is the sales process. We wanted it to be really low friction, just click sign up on the website, boom, you're in the product using it. Second of all, basically just a lot more emphasis on design and intuitive product experience. And then third of all, security being basically built in by design. It shouldn't be something that you need to configure or be a security expert. It should just be secure out of the box. So that is a kind of a high level overview. Today I'm just going to kind of walk through the product, and you'll see hopefully the ways we've achieved those things. So
so when you're ready, I'm going to take the low-tech approach of just turning our camera around to the screen, so you let me know
perfect.
When you're ready to do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
All right. Here we go. Are we looking at something there? We are. Maybe I'll just do this. Get that right on there. Yes. How about that?
Perfect. So
we can even get the mood lighting going here. There we go.
Nice. So before I jump directly into the demo, I wanted to just give a quick overview of some of the really cool features and functionality that we have that I think it's easy to overlook and not notice. So I just wanted to actually call those things out before jumping into the demo so that you can actually look out for them as we go.
And this is, to put a fine point on it, right? This is specifically a Mac management product. You're not doing iOS, or are you?
No iOS, yeah, just Mac.
Just Mac.
Yep.
So Mac admins rejoice.
Yeah, which is also pretty different than most vendors in the space. There's a few that do focus on Mac, kind of Mac first, but most of them don't, right? Most of them build iOS support first, and then Mac was kind of an afterthought. So It's pretty unique for us to be one of the few vendors who actually are Mac first. Okay, so quick overview of the features and functionality that are most exciting to me personally are these. So packaging and patching. Totally automated. This is something that really frustrated us in our past jobs. Just not having this be an automated thing means that either you spend a lot of your time spinning up a bunch of your own infrastructure and managing this kind of in-house yourself through automation, but automation that you have to build, or just totally manually. A lot of companies that we've seen before they used us, or even if they've been using a competitor's product, they actually don't do patching really because it's so hard that a lot of companies just don't do it, and we think that's really sad and bad. So
can, that sounds like music to my ears, and probably a lot of Mac admins. Like, packaging is toil that no one generally likes. What do you mean when you say fully automated? How does this get automated?
Absolutely. So basically, instead of every company having to automate this themselves in-house, we do all that automation on our end, and then it's just exposed to you in our product.
So common packages.
Absolutely, yeah. So not some custom thing internal to your company, and we can talk about the ways that you can do that through Fleetsmith.
Okay.
But this is more things that are are publicly available common packages that are software that every company needs. So if you need to install Dropbox on every machine in your company, Slack, Google Chrome, that becomes instead of like a manual process where you have to track those patches or rely on open source to kind of do that for you. We built that directly into the product. So we have the concept of a catalog in Fleetsmith, and you can just go in there and click on the things you want, and then we install it and we keep it updated totally automatically.
Nice.
It's pretty nice. Same thing for macOS upgrades. So this was a big source of pain for us as well in our former jobs. Anytime there's a new release, so High Sierra just came out, actually getting that pushed out and enforcing it, including user notifications. That was a lot of custom work, or just like a lot of running our own infrastructure, and having that be just a one-click deal is really nice.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is the most kind of Apple sanctioned way. So you're probably familiar with StartOS install.
Mm-hmm.
We just use that in the background. And we do some things on top of that in terms of UI to warn the users so that they understand what's happening. Because the last thing we want is basically the situation where you enforce something and it just enforces like during someone's board meeting while they're presenting, the CEO is presenting to the board, right? And so that's where the automatic user notifications also is super nice. So if you actually enforce something in Fleetsmith, the UI changes. Normally, if it's not enforced, you can just set your notification intervals yourself through the UI.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's enforced, since we think it's so important that the employees actually warn before the enforcement happens, we take over the notifications at that point and just do them automatically at increasing frequencies as the deadline approaches. File Vault's another big pain point for people, including myself at Dropbox in the past. There's Monkey if you want to do open source for patching, right? Combined with auto package. But then you need to spin up crypt if you want to do File Vault, enforcement and key escrow. And so, it was important to us that in our product, we actually solve that problem for people as well, that we don't hand wave that, right? So again, it's just like one click, enforce it. We use personal recovery keys because that's the most reliable and most tested thing. I believe institutional recovery keys are broken again on High Sierra.
I don't know if they're broken, but I mean, we never liked those.
Yeah.
Even back in the File Vault 1 days, we advised against using institutional recovery keys.
And then again, the focus on security. So I can talk a little bit about this when we go through the demo, but basically we take security really seriously, and one of the ways that manifests itself in the product is the first time our agent runs, which is just a small binary, extremely lightweight, written in Go. It actually sends a certificate signing request, and when you approve that device in our web UI, you're actually telling our certificate authority to go ahead and sign that. And from that point on, it's all mutual TLS, right? So very, very secure. We only allow, since we control both ends, we're very aggressive on our TLS configs. We pin our root CA in the binary, so you cannot man in the middle of that. And then, so that's the encryption in transit, right? But then in addition, we want to make sure that we're protecting this very sensitive data, your personal recovery keys for File Vault at rest as well. And so we actually encrypt those with per customer AES keys before we write that to the database. And so that's kind of brings me to the next point. This is what we mean when we say secure by design. It's kind of a fanatical attention to detail on every part of the stack, whether it's the web app, whether it's our agent, or whether it's anything else, our infrastructure, for example. At each layer, we kind of go nuts on this stuff.
Where you store the private key for the client server keychain or on files?
Great question. We store it currently in two places. One is in a SQLite database on disk, as well as the keychain. We should talk about why afterwards. But we did that for a few different reasons.
That certificate
What's that?
issues.
The
Go library,
just
that
keychain reliability. We didn't want to go all in on that. Yeah, we needed to have a way to like rebootstrap it in there. And the thing is, obviously, since the private key is generated on device and we purposely don't collect that, if it gets messed up for some reason, there's no way for us to actually rebootstrap it unless it was some crazy server side initiative thing where we like told it to just auto trust the new CS. It would be very complicated, basically. Okay, directory services. So this was also really important to us. We really dislike the fact that with so many products, kind of the standard for any IT product is that before you can actually import your list of employees, you have to go through this crazy, first you have to have LDAP somewhere, which is its own whole, bag of hurt. And then even assuming you already have that, great, you already had Active Directory or something in your environment or Open LDAP. That's great, that you don't have to start by spinning that up, but what you still have left is, configuring all the TLS config between whatever you're using for your management and your LDAP server, making sure that all those connections are actually secured well, then doing any user attribute mapping between like your management product and your source of truth for your identity, right? And so we really wanted to avoid all that. And so just having a totally automatic integration where you can just one-click import your list of employees with zero configuration is pretty nice. And so that's what we built. And then enforcement. So something we really hated was the fact that anytime we did an enforcement, we had to calculate one single time in UTC that worked for everyone worldwide, which is literally impossible if you have multiple offices in 5 different time zones. Yeah. And so we built enforcement with local time. And so in the web UI, it tells you as the admin that the time you're choosing will be enforced in local device time. And that way you can send a single company email that says, hey, everyone, this is going to be enforced next Thursday at 12 noon. And that will be a true statement, regardless of where they're located. So that's really nice as well.
So one thing that I just want to be clear on, again, for people who might not be familiar with Fleetsmith, is compared to other management products, this is all cloud-based. Right?
100%
like
cloud.
Nothing on-prem. You don't need to install anything. You don't need to set up a local server, firewall rules, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. Okay. Which is also why we take security so seriously, because one of the objections you can get to something that's cloud-based is, well, what about security? Mm-hmm. And so thankfully, because of our fanatical approach to security, we do have that conversation frequently, but usually the way it goes is, well, I'm concerned about X, Y, and Z, and we say, well, here's what we do, and then people say, well, that's actually way better than we would ever do internally, so never mind, we're fine here.
Right, and I mean, I think as we've seen, I want to say, it's so frustrating, I want to say, like, small companies will appreciate that, or smaller companies should appreciate that, because they tend to not be able to invest a lot in security, a security team.
Totally.
But as we're seeing, large companies tend not to do that either. I mean, Equifax and OPM, and just this week it was a Deloitte and Accenture. I mean, it's like these people should be doing security right. So it's great to hear that you have a real focus on that, and like any customer should appreciate that, because we're seeing more and more examples of people just not getting it right for one reason or another.
Yep. I mean, it makes sense. It's a big time investment.
It's a big time investment, but like, again, these large companies that are protecting people's data. So it seems like they slip up on just like being consistent about process. Like the Accenture thing was, they left some AWS containers like publicly readable. Like, oh my god, like, how did that not get taken care of?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's brutal.
FDIC, I mean, it's just.
Yeah, I heard an interesting thing. I won't give attribution, but I heard an interesting thing from someone who is kind of in the security penetration testing world, and they said that there's almost an inverse relationship between size of the company and how secure they are, which makes sense. There's just so much more surface area at that point.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Anyway, should we jump into the demo?
Sure thing.
All right. So let me switch over to Chrome here. So, I realized I should actually show this first. So this is our homepage. The reason I show this is because we ran into this hilarious situation where people didn't actually believe us when we explained how easy the sign-up process was. So they would be very skeptical that clicking this button would actually sign them up like immediately. And so we had to create a little video. So if you watch this, it's pretty quick, but you just click that sign up button, you OAuth, and then you are in the product. That is literally the entire sign up process.
Wow.
And it's free for up to 10 devices. So now that with that out of the way, I'll show you. This is obviously once you've already signed up. This is the login screen. We'll go ahead and click sign in here. So again, the fact that we had no configuration to get to the point where we have single sign-on, super nice. We ask for very limited scopes, only what we need, read only. And this is what it looks like. So the first thing you'd want to do, this is obviously an environment that's already set up, but if you wanted to kind of start from scratch, you'd want to do something like this. You'd want to go to the users page, and you'd want to go to import users. And we actually have in-product onboarding that would guide you through this process. From here, you can see your entire user list of all your users in Fleetsmith. Then you can import anyone you want to. You can, of course, also filter out, if you have bot accounts, you could go ahead and hide those users so that they won't show up in subsequent imports. We'll go ahead and import these 3 people. This is the list of users now that we've already imported to Fleetsmith. There's this deployment problem. Whenever you have purchased a new product to manage your Macs, presumably the reason you've done that is because you don't have a way of managing your Macs currently, right? And shockingly, the problem of deployment has been historically overlooked. So how do you go from no management at all to 100% managed, right? Yeah. Especially if it's in a place where there's a surprising number of companies where they didn't really realize that they would ever want to manage their machines, and so there was no foresight in, oh, well, maybe we should enable SSH, have some type of service account, or remote desktop, or some way of getting into machines remotely. And so we do see a lot of environments where they literally have nothing, no way of getting into machines. And so we have to help solve this deployment problem. And so the way we do that is we let you filter your list of users down to only the people who don't have at least one device assigned to them. Yeah. Right? And so that's what you're seeing here. From here, this is already super valuable information, but you really want to go to the next step and get these people managed. And so you can do that by selecting people in this list. You can go ahead and select all if you want. And then you can email these people. Now, there's a few different ways we could have built this. Kind of the most obvious way would be for us to send the email from us as the service, right? You're kind of used to seeing those like, oh, someone shared a file with you on Google Drive, right? That's the model people are used to, but now in the world of like phishing emails, especially because the action here is going to be, hey, can you download this installer and install it on your machine? We wanted this to be done in the most kind of trustworthy way. And so we built this, again, with an integration with G Suite. So you can click that email button and it'll actually pop a Gmail Compose window pre-populated with an email kind of template and all those people in the BCC field. And now you could of course modify this to match your internal kind of culture and tone. But this is all you really have to do to get this email sent out to people. Then they just hit this link and install the agent. Now, I will say that we built the installer to Apple's best practices. So it's a standard, flat package signed with our Apple Developer Certificate. And if you are lucky enough to already have some way of getting into your machines through SSH or ARD or whatnot, we did build it so it can be run totally non-interactively. Nice. And so as soon as it's run, it'll automatically contact the Fleetsmith servers, send in its certificate signing request, and show up for approval in the web app. And what that looks like is, if we go over to the devices page here, we can see that there's one new device pending for approval. We can go ahead and review that. This is one of our test machines. And this is the next point at which we really thought about like the pain that we had experienced in our past lives as IT and security people. And one of the big pain points was the first time a device checks in, you really have no idea who it belongs to. and you have to do this painful lookup process. Many companies completely manually. So you get the serial number, but then you have to tab over to your inventory spreadsheet, which hopefully is up to date, fingers crossed, right? And then you find out who it belongs to, and then you go through this drop down, and then you manually select the user. But if you have 300 machines pending here, that's a really slow process, even if it's like 30 seconds per machine. And so we wanted to improve that. And so we just auto predict using some data that we collect with the agent. We are able, since we have this hook in with your source of identity, we can make an educated guess about what user should be assigned to this machine. And this works, I'd say, around 95% of the time. So most times you can actually just do a kind of spot check. It depends on your level of sort of security in your environment. But if you wanted to, you could probably safely do kind of a spot check and just click, approve and assign all. So you go from like 30 seconds per machine for 300 machines to literally like one click and another click, and boom, you're done.
What I really like is on the device's the main page, just the little badges, firewall disabled, firewall disabled. Like that is fantastic.
Yeah.
21 plus days since last check-in.
Yeah, that's like the worst. That's the reason that's red is because that's really like no matter what the reason is, it's all bad.
Yeah.
Because either it's like they lost the machine, it was stolen, someone uninstalled the agent, or it's just stopped working for some reason. All of those things are really bad. So the fact that you can just again filter that list down, and again just email these people and say, hey, please stop by the help desk. Something went wrong with your machine. We need to get you remanaged. That's also really powerful.
Yeah. I love that. That's really nice.
So this is kind of like almost like Fleet Insights part of it, but you can obviously also fix these problems, right? So getting to kind of the most exciting part of the product, in my opinion, I'm going to flip over to the catalog. So, let's say that, you want to resolve that problem of these 3 machines that don't have File Vault enabled. You could go into the catalog here. We are right now looking at the settings portion of the catalog. So you've got things like, authentication and screen lock, gatekeeper, application layer firewall, and File Vault, right? So if you want to enforce File Vault, all you have to do is click on that. And I don't know how familiar you guys are, or the people on the Hangout with the number of steps it would take to actually get File Vault enforcement plus automatic key escrow with other solutions, but it's pretty painful. In contrast, with Fleetsmith, it's literally this is the entire process. I'll just go through it. So we're going to add this to global. A profile in Fleetsmith is different than an Apple profile. It refers to a collection of apps and settings, and the global profile applies to every machine. So if you want to do this company-wide, you would add it to global. Now, at this point, it's already going to show up as an optional thing in the agent menu bar app. It would show up there. But if you want to enforce this so that everyone will actually get force encrypted by a certain date and time, it's this easy. So you just click that button, and then you choose your date. Let's say 27th. And we default to 12 noon because it's a pretty safe time because that's when people go to lunch. But you can change it to whatever you want.
What time zone is
It's always local.
It's always local device time because we hated the fact that we had to calculate.
I read.
Yeah, no, so it's pretty nice. You can just do one company email that says, hey, everyone, File Vault will be enabled at 12 noon on the 27th, and it'll be true wherever they are, which is super nice. And that's literally the whole process. So now File Vault will be enforced. People get increasing notifications as the deadline approaches. On the last day, it increases to every hour. And then in the last hour, it's every 15 minutes. And then in the last 5 minutes, we're pretty paranoid about the situation where someone's totally disabled all of Notification Center. So we also have a red countdown that shows up in the menu bar 5 minutes beforehand. As just an extra precaution.
And so you're enforcing, in this example, you're enforcing File Vault via dropping a profile on someone's machine.
Precisely, yeah.
So this might be jumping ahead. I apologize.
No worries, yeah.
Ahead, but this all takes place through the agent, or do you act as an MDM?
This is all through the agent.
Okay.
We started with building out an agent because we looked at the kind of feature set we wanted to accomplish, and the coverage isn't actually there. If you go,
totally.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that you can do, but obviously an MDM will let you push profiles, and not with this type of right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things we wanted to do was like have notifications, that are automatic as a deadline approaches, and have the concept of a deadline.
Oh, sure.
And then for OS upgrades, which is another thing we support, we wanted to actually have like a full screen thing that says, hey, we're basically in the install preparation phase now. Don't shut down your computer.
Yeah.
You can't really do. I mean, maybe you could get it to work.
You're
but
totally right. I was really only asking because I'm sure you know that like the MacAdmin world is kind of on fire right now with
absolutely
needing an MDM to get around the kernel extension loading problem. So
yeah.
I wasn't sure if this sort of nailed down a bunch of problems all at once.
I will say that we're trying to be as future-proof as possible. So whenever we can, we do things the Apple sanctioned official way.
Yeah.
So things like using StartOS install for the upgrade process. Also, the way we do deliver this config and other mobile configs, it is mobile configs. It's not us shelling out. Whenever we can do something with the mobile config, we do. Furthermore, we go nuts on security there as well, more than I think any other vendor. So every single mobile config is signed with our Apple Developer Cert.
Nice.
And then beyond that, if the mobile config contains any sensitive data in its payload, we actually encrypt that payload with that specific device's public key. So even if you copied that mobile config to another device, it would actually fail to decrypt, which is really nice. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it on File Vault. The way the agent looks is it's really minimal. We try to stay out of the way as much as possible with employees. We don't want to, be badgering people if they don't have to. There's no reason why they would care about something. Then we just try to operate as silently as possible. So a great example of that is actually the patching. So if you have set, Fleetsmith to automatically install an application, if that application is not open and being used actively, we'll just silently update that in the background. We won't even, do a notification because most employees really don't care, and in fact don't want to be bothered with a bunch of notifications unless it's something that's going to interrupt them. So if it is something that's going to interrupt them, that's when we actually do the notifications. Another one I'll show real quick is authentication screen lock. So hopefully this kind of shows the approach in terms of like making really intuitive product experiences for these things. So instead of sort of like just having maybe text boxes and having you kind of enter a bunch of the config, or like having the IT admin, create the mobile config and paste it in themselves, we do that all automatically on the back end, and we just expose everything through a really clean, simple UI here. And it's not just the password complexity settings, it's also, screensaver lockout. If you want to block people from unlocking with the Apple Watch, you can do that if you want to. If you use smart cards in your org, you can control all the smart card settings. You can say that only smart cards that have certs issued by, your internal CA are allowed. So we support, kind of fairly cutting edge mobile configs. I think, this was only introduced in 10.12.4, for example. And then we also document some of Apple's bugs there. So that's kind of the settings. We did just launch a new category, which is the one we're looking at here, on June 20th, called Security and DevOps. And this shows off some of the really more powerful integrations that we can do. So if you want to deploy something like OS Query in your environment, historically that's been really intense on IT teams to actually manage all that config and get that all pushed out. So the really cool thing we've done is just make that really simple. So I'll just demonstrate on my test VM here. If we go in and click configure, once we start managing this, we can choose. We support all the different modes for OS Query. So if you wanted to just log to a local log file on disk, that's local mode, right? We support all the default packs, so you can choose which packs you want. If you are using something like Collide or Uptix or Zentral for OS Query, we support TLS server mode, which is what all three of those things are. So you can just plug in your server information here. One thing that's cool that I'll point out again about our seriousness around security. Anytime you see this golden key icon, that means that field is actually going to be encrypted at rest before it's written to the database. So paste your certs here, API endpoints, and then once you hit save here, we'll not only install OS Query, keep it patched automatically anytime a new version comes out. We'll also manage all this config, and anytime you change something here, we'll just automatically change it on disk. So this is the stuff that's really cool and pretty unique about kind of the app catalog and the way we're thinking about this stuff.
Santa.
I would love to. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything. You know what, let me show one more thing. We didn't really go over the device detail page, which is also pretty nice. So I'll just show a test device here. We also show a bunch of metrics, metadata about the machine. So serial number, custom asset tags, how much disk space there is, CPU, serial, etc. As well as important things like, is file vault disabled, is it enabled, and also is it managed, right? Have you actually enforced that file vault is going to be managed on this device? Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So you have some built-in fleet-wide reporting reports, and
it depends what you mean. So we have basically the stuff that we expose on the device page that I showed earlier. There's some amount of that exposed.
To know, like, so you have OS Query integration. What if you want to report on how many machines in my fleet have more than 8 gig of RAM or 16 gig of RAM or something along those lines? Like, custom reports or?
Not right now. That would be an interesting thing for us to add.
It's kind of interesting, like if you're collecting all that data.
Yeah, I guess the best way right now would be to use OS Query in like TLS server mode with another product, and then you could just do whatever custom queries you wanted that way.
Yeah.
That's probably the right approach to that.
Okay. That's good. That looks great. I mean,
Thank you.
It looks really appealing. Like, a lot of admin tools are very bare bones and sort of function over form in some ways. This looks like it has both, so
thank you.
That's really great.
Yeah, this is one we just launched too, because we're at the point where the catalog is very powerful, but there's always going to be like one app that that we don't have in there that your org needs.
Yep.
Even it could just be a publicly available app, but we just haven't gotten to it yet in terms of adding it to the catalog. And so there's kind of two different options there. One is that people can email us and we add stuff as quickly as possible. But the other is if you have a really custom use case, we did just launch custom bash scripts on June 20th as well. And actually, sorry, that this was actually launched after that. But this way you can basically achieve really anything that you want to do. And so we handle the scheduling for you, but then you handle all of the actual logic yourself, right? So you can choose run it every minute, every n number of hours, once a day, or on certain days of the week, choose time of day, and then you just pop your script in here, and we just take care of the scheduling. But all the logic is totally up to you. And so if there are things like custom packages that people need installed, that's some maybe internal developer build of some app that their company actually makes. Obviously, they might not want to give that to us, but this way they could just write a script that curls it down and installs it that way.
Nice. So yeah, that's great.
And these are also encrypted at rest.
Oh, yeah. So possible slight change of direction, but every MacAdmin right now likes beating up on Apple, and we've all had some gripes about High Sierra. Has High Sierra presented you any challenges?
Surprisingly not.
Nice.
I credit that to our engineering team and the architecture of the agent. The fact that it's written in Go means we have no dependencies, so we don't break just because system libraries break or change. That was also a very intentional choice that came from some past learnings in our past lives. And then things like TLS, the fact that we can just use the TLS that's built into Go instead of having to rely on OpenSSL or secure transport is also pretty nice for us.
In the meantime, I'm going to turn this around so people can see our lovely faces.
We had to make some small changes for the way we detect file vault encryption status because of APFS, but it was pretty minimal.
Oh yeah, APFS. That was the big change for a lot of systems.
Yep.
Nice. Anyone on the Hangout have any questions?
Yeah, I have a few Go questions. My first question is, do you do any CGO in your region, or have you avoided that? Like the APFS call, for example, do you link against a private library, or do you shell out? And the second question I had was, have you ever run into problems syscall changes, like the Go standard library wraps all the syscalls? So there have been a few cases where Apple has changed their DI and Go version, like OS 10 version, that it has some problems.
Yeah, so right now we're not using CGO. I think we may be using it for like one thing, but unfortunately, it was just a speed of development thing, and it's something we're not super proud of. But we have plans to kind of revisit that, but haven't had the bandwidth because we're just a small team. So, and no, so we haven't run into any problems around the syscalls.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that problem, but I think as long as you don't update, right, your Go version, like you can avoid that if you hear about it before. Or correct me if I'm wrong, because that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, we do use CGO a few places, but just not comprehensively, I'd say.
Yeah, the first issue was happening because Go made some changes while macOS 10 was still in beta, and then Apple changed things last minute. So there was a release.
I do recall we had to add some extra flags in order to work around some issue, but I can't remember what exactly that was.
Okay. With Go build on macOS, you might be using CGO in many places.
Sure. Yeah.
Like the certificate roots that uses CGO
in
the background.
Yeah, I guess I meant we're not doing anything beyond what Go does for you. Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions on FleetSmith for Mac management?
Pretty cool stuff.
It is. It is. I have to say, like, I've been in the DevOps IT space for a very long time, and I've been at Google a long time now, but I've been with some smaller companies, and oh my God, if I went back to working at a small company, like how different everything would be. Like we used to have like our own IMAP servers, everything on premises, and like it would just all be in the cloud. It'd be FleetSmith. It'd be I wouldn't want anything for like a 50-person company or smaller. I wouldn't want anything on site. Yep. I just want to pipe to the internet. And that's it. So this is really nice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's actually a pretty interesting trend that we've seen too, where people are actually choosing us for our securities explicitly. We're seeing companies in highly regulated spaces actively choosing us because of that, which is pretty cool.
That's nice.
Do you have to, have you looked into like getting, probably, I don't know if this is your target audience, but like FedRAMPs, getting into maybe some of those smaller federal agencies that don't have Mac administration but want to admin Macs?
Yeah, I've definitely thought about the compliance stuff. I was actually on the team that did SOC 2 for the first time at Dropbox. The tricky thing there is just the right time, the right time to do it. And I think the right way to approach it is just based on customer demand. And thus far, knock on wood, it's been enough to just have a really comprehensive, like in-depth whiteboarding and technical conversation about everything we do internally in even more detail than I talked about today. And that's been enough so far.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there will come a point when it makes sense for us to actually just go ahead and do that stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah,
Very
thank you.
much I'm glad you were in New York. I'm glad it worked out. We've been kind of talking about you visiting for a while. And
Yeah.
To give some people the backstory, like how dedicated Jesse was, he got me yesterday on chat and said, "Hey, is MacAdmin Monthly tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, good. Let me change my flight." So we changed his flight to be here today. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
like,
my
when did you
pleasure.
push it off to? Like when?
Tomorrow morning.
Oh, okay,
Same,
nice.
Same flight, different day.
All right. Yeah, great. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. Yeah.
I'm glad
Thanks
you're here.
for having me.
Yeah. And that's, speaking of security, that's a nice transition. Papayan is on the Hangout from Duo Security. And if he's listening, there he is.
He is.
Hey, hi, how are you?
Good, good. Awesome talk, by the way, Jesse. I like seeing how Fleetsmith is moving fast. You guys are doing great work.
Thank you.
And yeah, so we had Papayan and some people from Duo on a few months ago talking about Duo Beyond and some of the work we're doing there. And if you want to elaborate, I know Duo released a paper on EFI and firmware security. If you could enlighten us about that, Papayan, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna try to do this with just as my boss calls them, mouth words. The slides help a lot with this, but I'll give the short version of this. So it kind of started with kind of this thing that a lot of Mac admins out there had sort of been aware of, like EFI firmware. I guess you should keep that up to date, but why? And it's kind of a pain, and there's not a lot of visibility. And depending on what models you want to install it for, it used to be kind of a hassle to do it because it was a very manual process where you had to download an app and then run it and then shut a Mac down and hold down a key and then wait for a tone. And it was, very much, what year is this kind of territory. It didn't scale very well for anyone managing more than, maybe 5 Macs. So Apple changed that around the time when let's see, there were a couple of big milestones in sort of like EFI research. Snare, a red team researcher who is now at Apple, I think red teaming as well, in 2012 had a sort of a first, real public presentation of like, these are all the things that are wrong with EFI, and this is why it's bad, because it's, essentially sitting under the kernel. And if you can get into the EFI firmware, you have control over everything at a very persistent level where I can rip out the hard drive, let's say, and reinstall a fully new OS, and whatever I'm able to implant in the firmware, which is a completely different chip on the machine itself, I'm still there, and I get right back to to my malicious business, so to say.
Right.
So
the problem there is like firmware has always been a problem, but
right.
the firmware nowadays, like EFI, is so much more powerful. That's
yeah, yeah. I mean, it has drivers for everything. It has drivers for networking, for storage, for you name it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that cut.
Yeah, cut out a little bit. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So super powerful, has access to pretty much everything on the system at a very low, as we call it, like ring -2 level, where ring 0 is the kernel. Like if you're in for good. So, and then there was great work by Trammell Hudson and some other folks there who, all but one, I guess at this point, just Trammell is not working for Apple, but all the other researchers that, showed the proofs of concept, the Thunderstrikes of this world, and showed that starting first with sort of the evil made physical attacks to Thunderstrike 2 being completely remotely exploitable, that this was now a real concern. So Apple started shipping these EFI updates with the OS updates, and they were supposedly streamlined and kind of you didn't have to worry about it anymore. Obviously, There was some knowledge among, I think, some sort of tribal knowledge among Mac admins that wasn't always the case. Depending on how you deploy your updates, you may be doing something a little artisanal and off the Apple recommended path. So long story short, I said internally, like, we should look at this just to see what the state of the union is, so to say. Like, can we figure out how well this actually works? So we researched a bunch of angles on this. So we grabbed all the firmware updates that Apple released since the Thunderstrike 1 and 2 patches started to go out, kind of mapped which models are actually getting updates, which are not, and then also empirical data as far as like, are these updates actually taking? So we got some really great cooperation from various folks out in the MacAdmin community who I'll thank very much. We got 70,000+ data points, which I know, Ed, for you is nothing, but for a data set, it's quite nice. So we analyzed it. We basically said, we now have a sort of a matrix from Apple that says, when you have this build of the OS and this model Mac, you should have at least this version of EFI. If it's newer, you may have upgraded and downgraded for reasons, but it should be at least at a minimum level to be considered up to date and ostensibly secure. So we did the analysis, and then with a lot of data sciencing, we came to some big numbers. So from the data set, we checked 10, 11, 10, 10, 10, 10, 11, 10, 12. We saw that overall 4.2% were out of date for what they should be. And then when you look at specific models, some are like really out of date, like some newer iMacs were at like 40% out of date. And starting at 10.10, going to 10.12, the overall out of date number per, on an OS, complete OS basis also went up. Like for 10.12, it was, I think, just around 10% or so, whereas 10.10 was less out of date. So all data numbers basically that we put in our report. We really dug into how does this thing work, how does the EFI updater know which EFI actual file payload to apply, and is there some overlap where some models use one, an iMac 13,2 will use the firmware from 13,1. How does it know to do that? Like, how does it work? So lots of wonderful reverse engineering there. And we published it. We had to talk about it. We obviously, we got in touch with Apple about this to kind of give them a heads up, like, hey, no real juicy vulnerabilities here, but this is something that you might want to, at least look at. So we gave them, the usual sort of 90-day disclosure, and they worked with us. They were great. They definitely, helped us confirm a lot of our findings, and they said, yeah, what you found is correct. So, thank you for the heads up. So we published it. We first gave the talk at Echo Party in Argentina a couple of 2 weeks ago by now, week and a half, and presented that. We have a paper out, white paper that is on our site, et cetera, et cetera. You can grab it. There's no your name on the dotted line to get this thing. We made it very accessible. We released an API and a tool that you can use in your org to run your own endpoints against and see, how good or how not good your fleet is as far as EFI versions. And we're continuing this work with 10.13, adding like the EFI check capability where they check the integrity of the EFI on your system. So they don't necessarily check that you have the latest, but at least that it hasn't been messed with, which is a great step forward, I think, as far as like a platform goes. Like the Mac is definitely, and Apple is definitely at the forefront. The Wintel world is probably so bad, I don't even want to think about it, as far as like the fragmentation of like all the hardware vendors and then the firmware vendors that have something to do with that. It might be an interesting research, but we're still kind of like updating our research as well. So trying to put some community tools out there to help everyone be more in have the knowledge how their fleet looks and be able to do something about it. So that's the short long story.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, the community appreciates that, and I think we all know the shame of it is that it takes the community to divine some of this stuff, because wouldn't it be nice if we just got a list from Apple? Like, this hardware should have this revision. at minimum. It seems like going forward, Apple really is saying, like, as you mentioned, there's some sort of non-Apple approved ways of updating your firmware that have kind of worked, but Apple seems to be cracking down on that a bit more, and you'll really only have a full set of firmware and everything, particularly on the touch bar machines. Everything will only get updated if you're using sort of their official installers. I think as a bunch of us have seen, the 1013 installer kind of comes down as a stub and then reaches out to the internet and gets the right thing for your specific hardware. And they're going to be doing that more and more. So Apple has said, certainly with 1013, to do the install, an internet connection is required. That's, I mean, I guess that's good. I don't want to say that that's some horrible thing that they're doing, but it's a change at the very least that we kind of need to be aware of.
Yeah, and on these Touch Bar Macs, it's also sort of a dual system. The embedded OS for that runs the actual Touch Bar is iOS style activated. It downloads over the internet. It repairs itself.
Yep.
But then the EFI currently is still files on disk that you need to get during a specific time of upgrading or updating your OS or doing a security update. So I think we can probably say that Apple is not done with that system. There's probably more to come to make it more EOS and less old school app-based installs. So at least they're working on it. So I definitely give them props for not letting this slide and pretty much hiring all the people that showed how you can break it and now make them fix it. So that's a good way to go.
Yeah. They've definitely scooped up some good people, which is good to see. Some people who have some real deep firmware knowledge, and I think again, as a community, we kind of know that as people have been reverse engineering some of these updates and things, there are more and more references to secure boot. So we hope that is coming, and we hope it shows up in some form that's acceptable to all of us, because you kind of never know with Apple, right? Like their idea of secure boot might be something that we're not considering or thinking might show up. So we'll see.
Yep, for sure.
But you're going to be out at MacTech in, what is it, a month-ish now? A month and a week? Talking about.
Sure.
Yeah. So looking forward to some more detail and chatting in person.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have some more updated content related to 1013 as well, because there's some stuff in there that was kind of hard to publish because it was all figured out during the beta period, and we kind of don't want to start publishing a whole bunch of stuff that at the time wasn't released yet. So we'll have some updates as far as like how the older Mac Pros are actually getting, finally after many years, are getting a honest to God EFI update as well, and some of the other processes kind of outline like this is what Apple changed since we did our original research. So definitely not to recommend my own talk, but come see it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Questions from anyone? General questions? Hi.
Hi, my name is Ben. I'm from MongoDB.
Oh, nice.
Late today.
Cool. Nice. Cool. And you're doing Mac OS work?
Not so much. I work on the security team.
Yeah,
but I do have a former life as a MacAdmin.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Good.
There's a few of us,
Yeah.
including mine.
Yeah. All right. Slack channel. Anybody questions? Let us solve your problems for you. Otherwise, we'll do our normal wrap up. We very often wrap up with community events. I just mentioned MacTech. MacTech is coming up in about a month and a week, in November, out in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tom, who's off camera now, you're going to be talking. So we think. Papine's going to be giving a talk with Rich from Duo Security. We mentioned Tremel Hudson. He's going to be opening up the conference. I am incredibly excited about that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this year. I think we have a lot of good talks lined up. And speaking of conferences, last week just wrapped up Max Sysadmin in Sweden, which is always a great conference, always a good time. And I mean, as a conference organizer, like, you hope your event gets better over time and you learn things over time. And I think Tico, who runs Max Sysadmin, is really just firing on all cylinders. This was probably the best year that I've attended. I think the talks were all really relevant, and just meeting up with everyone was great. And I know I say it all the time, but the Mac and Apple admin community is just the best in the world. Like, so little drama, and people are willing to share and help each other. And just getting together in person with everyone always reinforces that. It's so nice that, yeah, I know some communities that just play things close to the vest, and they want to sort of like protect this knowledge or something, like job security. But the MacAdmin community is better than that, so that's nice.
Yeah, very collaborative.
Yeah, and even though it's grown a lot over time, it still feels like a small, close-knit community. Even, you know, I mentioned MacTech, and there's Penn State conference, and there's a bunch of local conferences, and you see a lot of the same people, but it even still feels like a small, close-knit community when you go over to Sweden and see a whole new group of people. It's just, I don't know, it still feels homey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other events that I'm forgetting coming up? I think MacTech is the last big one of the year that I can think of. I know MacAdmin UK in London, this is going to be their third year. They just announced their dates, February 20th and 21st.
I think that's right. Yeah.
I think that's right. So I know they moved it. I haven't been able to attend their event because it was on my wife's birthday, and now they moved it back 2 weeks. So I think this will be the first year that I get out there.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I look forward to these events. They're always fun. And with that, with no questions, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next month.